Brother Clay did an excellent job, and even though it cut into a lot of what I wanted to say, it's very necessary, because that's the part of history that we're never told about, and it's extremely key that you have that in your consciousness if you choose to go the path of reclaiming your nationality and your identity and documenting your status in the public record. He pointed out that they superimposed, or we superimposed the corporate identity on them, and we need to clearly understand that that's exactly what's happening to us right now in 2006. We've been imposed artificial, fictitious corporate identity has been superimposed over the flesh and blood man and woman. And what I'm going to discuss, and I'm going to try to move briefly because I'm like way behind schedule. I know it's late, I know you all are tired, and you know, you've been here a good portion of the day. So I'm going to try to get everything in, but as quickly as possible. And if we can hold all questions to the end, if you can write it down. One of the ways that they impose the corporate fictitious identity on us is by putting us under an admiralty jurisdiction. What they did is they moved the waterline back and therefore put everybody under a corporate jurisdiction. And whenever you go into your banks, your public schools, your courtrooms, and you see the flag with the gold fringe flag on it, that's letting you know that you're in an admiralty jurisdiction. And basically, it is the law of the sea that is taking precedence. Do you have that picture of the admiralty flag so that you can see it? And it has the appearance of a regular flag, but you will see the gold fringes around it. And every place you turn, you will see that. Like I said, the banks, the schools, the courtrooms, the all public places, you know. And basically, when you're in this admiralty jurisdiction, they are identifying you as a ship or a vessel. You know, because as flesh and blood entities, they have no jurisdiction. And we have to be clear on that. That regulations, ordinance, codes, executive orders, they all apply to corporate entities, to corporate fictions, to strawmen, the all capital name. Just getting into admiralty a bit so that you can see what I'm talking about. There's the law of the land, and then there's the law of the water, and that's an admiralty jurisdiction. And all banking and everything is predicated on that. The Statue of Liberty was placed in the water because it represents liberty, like when a sailor gets liberty. The courts, unbeknownst to many of us, are the highest banks on the planet. And as I'm going to go into a little later on to show how the court system is a money-making institution predicated on your straw man. Court, just like you have a basketball court, a tennis court, it's all a big game. It's a big racket. Okay? The judge is the referee. He wears the black robe. He rules from the bench. The bench in Latin means bank. There's a connection between bench, bank, and the whole court system. The court is the highest bank ever. judge rules from the bank. You find banks on both sides of a river, like the river bank. The flow of currency, again, dealing with water, currency. Your money is currency because it is the flow that directs commerce. All ships are female because they're carrying items for money. A ship pulls into a harbor. The captain, capital, has to present to the port of authority a manifest. The manifest has a full description of all the items on the ship. When all the items on the ship represent money, maritime, admiralty products. When a ship is docked, it's called that it sits in its berth, B-E-R-T-H, corresponding with birth, B-I-R-T-H. When you were born, your mother's water broke. You came out of this and you were issued a birth certificate. That's the manifest. Because you're under international law. You see, you're seen as a maritime admiralty vessel in commerce. Your mother delivered you in a hospital. You came through her birth canal. Are we seeing the connection with birth and water and admiralty? You were delivered in a delivery room. And in essence, basically, the birth certificate was used to deliver you over to the state. Yes. Sometimes you may lose a product. For example, on a ship, a TV may break, or a child may be born stillborn. You are issued a death or birth certificate. These are all manifests. All of these words and terms are maritime, admiralty, international, banking laws. We are all seen as making money for the system. All governments, courts, lawyers, judges, churches, all operate, yes, I did say churches, in admiralty. This is why all churches are divided into denominations, such as 10s, 20s, 30s. Okay? Are you with me?
Oh, yes.
All are under admiralty. We've been in admiralty since 1868. Prior to this, all Americans were considered sovereign. In 1868, a company was incorporated as the United States Corporation, stipulated that all employees would be called citizens. President Bush is the head of a privately owned company, corporation, must understand how words are used to enslave you. The current banking system as we know it was started by the Knights Templar. You know, also this is connected to all the attorneys. Most people don't understand that the Bar Association stands for the British Accreditation Regency. We've never been separated from the Crown of England. Okay, government is 2% judicial, and 90% of the government has no delegation of authority to rule. But everything is based on assumption and presumption. And also with the judges not having proper standing, any immunities that they may have is lost because they don't have, they're all administrative judges. We have an Article 1, Article 2, Article 3 courts. Article 1 courts are admiralty. Article 2 courts are administrative. And Article 3 courts are the only sovereign courts in America. And most of us, when we're dealing with the court system, we're dealing in Article 2 administrative courts, where they only have jurisdiction over the straw man. I want to get into a little bit about the straw man. Do you have that? Okay, because that's key.
Could you go over the course just one more time? Myra, Articles 1, 2, and 3, can you repeat that?
Article 1 is maritime admiralty jurisdiction. You know, and pretty much all the courts are under that, because when you walk in there, you see the gold fringe flag. And then there's Article 2 courts, administrative, and Article 3 courts are for sovereign. And many of us, when we walk into the courtroom, we're going in as a straw man, as you'll see the all-capital name on the caption. So all of these constitutional rights that you believe that you have, it does not apply to a corporate entity. It only applies to a flesh and blood man or woman. So unbeknownst to us, they have erected a lot of clever ways of changing our identity and changing our status completely unbeknownst to us. And we're thinking things are one way, but there's a whole nother esoteric dynamic going on.
Do you have your constitutional rights in Article 3 court?
If you come in there with your correct standing, everything is about correct standing.
So although it's a court for sovereign, how do they proceed if you don't come in with correct standing?
Well, you, number one, if you're there, you fought like hell to be there. Because everything is presumed here, presumed to be the straw man. Okay. We also need to understand that there are several, at least 3 different United States. There's the United States of America. I have some visualization. How's it going? Did you show the Admiralty flag already? Okay, so we can go right to the straw man. Yeah, this is the flag that you'll see everywhere. And this is not the sovereign flag of the states, the United States. Could you go down the yellow French flag? It also represents martial law. So it's literally when you walk into the bank and everything, that there's no nation and no constitution. So you need to understand when you see this, that is the jurisdiction that you're in. Let me go to the PowerPoint. The Wizard of Oz was created, I believe, in '38, right after the entire bankruptcy. Going into the Straw Man, this was a movie that was created by Master Masons, and basically they was explaining to you what they had done. Just moving real quickly, the Federal Reserve was created in 1913, and basically they create money, they sell it to the United States Treasury at a much higher profit, you know, and then the debt of that is passed on to the American people. From 1913 to 1929, even backing up before that, according to the Constitution, the only lawful form of currency is gold and silver. And basically, there was a supply of gold available, you know, and creating all of this debt through the relationship with the Federal Reserve and the Treasury, the debt became unsurmountable. And I believe they were, how much is it, $22 billion worth of gold that was accessible in circulation, and the debt of the United States alone was $11 million. So by the time we got to 1929, the commerce, the stock market, the economy, everything crashed. So many of us have learned in school about the New Deal program by President Roosevelt. My own thing is the New Deal was, the real deal of the New Deal is it was a raw deal. You know, at that point is when they created the Maternity Act and they forced people to file birth certificates with the state. Then a bond was placed on the back of the birth certificate and then sold to the international bankers. And this is how the United States Corporation recovered from the whole stock market. And they, in essence, through the straw man and the birth certificate, they created an all capital name entity with the same exact names as you have. If you look on anything you're doing in commerce, has absolutely nothing to do with the flesh and blood man or woman. If you look on your driver's license, your birth certificate, your voter's registration card, your credit cards, your bill, it's all dealing with this all capital name entity. And as we were told in English class, a person's name, a man or woman's name is spelled with upper and lowercase name.
Yeah.
When you use all caps, you're creating a completely different entity, known as an egregious creature, as you can look it up in Black's Law Dictionary, as strenuous homo, straw man. All of these is basically they've created an artificial entity with the same name as you. And because you were never told about it, you are going around representing this artificial creature and standing in place for it. But there is a difference between the name your parents named you and the all capital name entity that's navigating in commerce.
Excuse me, sister. When we're called into the courts by our all capital name, how can we defend ourselves as far as being sovereign? Articles 1, 2, and 3. How do we get to Article 3?
But that's a whole nother, that's a whole nother lecture, getting into an Article 3 court. But the most important thing, and what I'm ultimately talking about today, is how to rebut the presumption that you and the straw man are one and the same, or that you are willing to be surety for the straw man.
Thank you.
Wait, go back. Okay, this is The Wizard of Oz, as I was saying, which was written by master masons, and they were basically among themselves communicating with each other, letting them know of the entire scam that was going on in American comics. It says, can you read between the lines and see the author's intent? The Wizard of Oz was an allegory for the condition of America in the 1930s following the stock market crash and the factual bankruptcy of the United States. Kansas was the geographical center of the U.S., the heartland of America. And in the movie, it deals with came a tornado, a stock market crash, a whirlwind of confusion that followed, which swept Dorothy Toto into a new artificial dimension above the solid ground of Kansas. Okay, after the bankruptcy, Kansas was no longer Kansas. It was now KS, an artificial corporate venue of bankrupt United States and newly established federal territory, part of the federal zone and operating under color of law. Before you go to the next one, we need to understand that strategic, calculated, organized steps have been taken to move us away from our flesh and blood, God-given selves. I first talked about, actually I missed it. I wanted to talk about earlier natural law. We are all from birth coming from natural law, the Creator's law. And when we enter into these jurisdictions, they're doing everything humanly possible to place us in another alien jurisdiction other than ourselves. With this whole bankruptcy, in order, when they removed the gold and silver out of circulation and gave us this fiat Federal Reserve notes, which have no value, they also had to put you in a federal jurisdiction. The United States itself consists of 10 square miles within Washington, D.C. That's why it's not a state. It's the District of Columbia. And then certain states contracted with the federal government, and that's how the umbrella has spread it out. But in order to fool the people and create an artificial reality existing at the same time as your reality, they created what's known as the Buck Act, the B-U-C-K. The Buck Act is the beginning of where we use the zip codes. When you use a zip code, you are in a federal territory, and that's where the federal government has jurisdiction. And when you use the two-letter abbreviation in the state's name, you are also placing yourself in the federal jurisdiction, in the federal jurisdiction. And all of these things are things we do every day. No one's ever warned us, prepared us, told us, and we acquiesce out of ignorance into these artificial jurisdictions. And then they have jurisdiction over the flesh and blood man. And it's operating under color of law. Color of law is the appearance or the semblance of law without any substance. It's a legal contractual right jurisdiction. Okay, comes now the straw man, the all capital letter, the artificial representation, the artificial, operative words here, representation of the American sovereign. The straw man had no brain. He could not think or act for himself. Some people without brains do not do an awful lot of talking. Of course, I'm not bright about doing things. You know, so the symbolism in the movie, the straw man is saying he had no brains. The straw man is an artificial entity. A lot of times when we as sovereigns go to court and they're dealing with the straw man, in answer to your question, brother, we'll give them a certified copy of our birth certificate. There's the straw man. There's the defendant, not the flesh and blood person.
What can be done to come up out of the color of law and still operate?
Rebutting the presumptions through affidavits, which I'm going to get into.
Okay, thank you. Continue. Thank you.
In the song, If I Only Had a Brain, the straw man stated, I'd unravel every riddle for every individual in trouble or pain. Once one discovers his straw man, exists all political and legal mysteries and confusions are resolved. When you take a legal title to the straw man and give him a brain, your brain, he can protect himself from legal trouble. Remember the Tin Man?
Yeah. Only had a heart.
What? The Tin Man stands for the tax identification number. That's your Social Security. Okay, they laid it all out in 1938, right in our face. The Tin Man was a hollow man made of metal, a vessel, a vehicle. Remember, the straw man was a vehicle or vessel that can travel in admiralty, in the water jurisdiction. Like the straw man, the Tin Man was missing something too, a heart. But the straw man and the Tin Man were artificial persons. One of the definitions of tin in Webster's dictionary is counterfeit. The Tin Man also represented the mechanical and heartless aspect of commerce and commercial law. Nothing personal, it's just business. The Tin Man carried an axe. The axe is a traditional symbol for God. Interesting fact, the word ace is the etymological related to the word axe. In a deck of cards, the only one above the king is the ace, i.e. God. What about the lion? What did he represent? The king of beasts. The once fearless American had lost their courage.
Oh, wow.
When you think about dealing with the IRS, a UCC constituted corporation, you probably lose a little courage. When you think about dealing with the, okay, you may not know it now, but the IRS deals with you strictly under the laws of commerce. And just like the Tin Man, commerce is heartless.
What is UCC?
Uniform Commercial Code. Professor Marvel, in the beginning of the movie, the wizard was represented by the traveling mystic, Professor Marvel. His shingle stated that he was acclaimed by the crowned heads of Europe, past, present, and future. Wow, acclaimed future rulers of Europe before they were crowned? Before bankers stole America, they had already disempowered the monarchies of Europe and looted their kingdom. So as I'm telling you, the Wizard of Oz tells the whole story. Professor Marvel lectured Dorothy of the priest of Isis and Osiris and about the time of Egyptian pharaohs. Sounds like Freemasonry. Did you remember that part in, did anyone remember that from the Wizard of Oz?
Probably the book, vaguely.
Well, who said the book?
Probably the book. I know that the movie and the book probably don't coincide at all.
Right. The slippers. In the movie, Dorothy wore the ruby red slippers. Note the original book by Frank Bond, the slippers were silver. They didn't want to give too much of it. At that same time the book was written, America still had its gold and silver. In the story, Dorothy's slippers carried her just as the stockpile of silver and gold, which then, backed the currency, carried the country to a position of prominence. Follow the yellow brick road means follow the trail of stolen gold. Like that movie where Show Me the Money, Where's the Money? Between 1916 and 1933, most of America's gold was hoarded by the private Federal Reserve and shipped to the federal owners in England and Germany. Now, this is the same time period that the Federal Reserve is selling Federal Reserve notes, which is what we use today, which is called money, and they're selling it to the Treasury at a significant interest. And then the Treasury is passing that debt on to the American people. While simultaneously they're doing that, they're taking, in those years, the gold outside of America. The reason was that the Federal Reserve notes could be redeemed in gold, and the use of Federal Reserve notes carried an interest and penalty that could not be paid in gold. When bankruptcy was declared in 1933, American people were required to turn in all gold coin, gold bullion, and gold certificates by May 1st. May Day, this is where you get the famous May Day. The birthday of communist Bavarian in 1776. The birthday of the IRS, I can't see the last one. Okay, celebrated worldwide on International Workers' Day. All of these days are celebrated under May 1st. A holy day indeed to the wizard and his tribe. I'll let you all read that one. But basically, this was the notice that Franklin Roosevelt had asked all the people to submit all their gold and silver. But again, it's wordplay. They were not asking the sovereign people, but the way it was worded, everyone turned in their gold and silver. Okay, now so that the powers that be wouldn't be cited for treason, they passed what's known as the famous House Joint Resolution 192. And really, with this,
whereas the holding or dealing in gold affect the public interest and are therefore subject to proper regulation and restrictions, and whereas the existing emergency has disclosed that provisions or obligations which purport to give the operee a right to require payment in gold or a particular kind of coin or currency are inconsistent with the declared policy of Congress in the payments of debts, and that payment in gold or a particular kind of coin or currency or in an amount in money of the United States measured thereby is declared to be against public policy, and every obligation heretofore or hereafter incurred shall be discharged upon payment dollar for dollar in any coin or currency which at the time of payment is legal tender for public and private debts.
now basically what they did was they removed the gold and silver from the circulation. They made it where you no longer could pay your debts with legal currency. And remember, this is a House Joint Resolution. It is not the law, and it shouldn't supersede the Constitution. But because the people were not aware of what was going on, they allowed that to pass. But most importantly, it was a clause to protect the powers that be at the time, should the American people ever figure out what they had done. They had a statement in there saying that you're allowed to discharge your debt dollar for dollar. So that if this information was ever disclosed, the powers that be could have plausible deniability, saying that we gave you an alternative. Because actually, House Joint Resolution is a remedy to discharge your debt since you can't pay it. But the only problem is they never taught us how to access the House Joint Resolution to discharge your debt. It's been about 70 years later, and there's small pockets of people that are figuring it out, and using this. Okay, our government struck a deal which traded our gold for firms, worthless paper with green ink on them. 'Cause if you go to the United States Treasury website like that, point where no matter how warped our perception is, this fake sense of Federal Reserve notes cannot stand in this current economy. And this is why we're preparing for the major crash. Basically, they're saying within the next couple of weeks, Bush is going to intentionally crash the Federal Reserve and devalue the Federal Reserve note by 50%. So if things are hard now, in the next couple of weeks, you can expect them to be even harder. And that's why it's key that we begin to start to network with each other, form barters, and try to redirect our energy other than chasing worthless security. Okay, the wicked witch of the West. Thank you. She wanted those slippers, just as the European bankers wanted America's silver and gold supply. The wicked witch of the West, her plan, cover the countryside with poppy flowers. Poppies are the source of heroin, opium, morphine. symbolically drug them. So basically, you know, that's been a formula that's been utilized throughout history. We've seen that recently in the 90s in our community where crack completely destroyed. We would have been, you really have to understand the importance of timing, because we would have been so far evolved as a people if it was not for crack. The crack destroyed us with those Rockefeller drug laws. It warehoused so many of our brothers for the last 10 years. It is primarily responsible with this whole new down low phenomenon, because you just warehouse able-bodied men, you know, giving them outrageous sentences.
Yes.
You know, so this is not a new form, is what I'm saying. You know, and we need to understand that as they understand what time it is, they are putting different roadblocks and parameters and barriers to keep us from getting where we need to go. And even you can see 91, 92, this was a crucial year. You know, this is when Daddy Bush came out with his whole New World Order. This is also when the rappers were ill. You had the illest lyrics. You had lyrics that stimulated consciousness. You had, you know, KRS-One, you know, yeah, Wu-Tang. You had Big Daddy Kane. You had, you know, and that was right at that era, because that's when the final stuff was being laid down for the New World Order agenda. That's when you began to see the flag laying on its side. Like when you see Bush now speak, instead of the flag being up, you're seeing it down with this, with the flag part down. That's letting you know that everything, Constitution suspended, you're under admiralty, you're a straw man, you know, it's basically a wrap. You know, and at that point was so crucial because subconsciously and unconsciously, even in our music, we knew we needed to make a shift. You know, like they say, shit happens. No, shifts happen. And in 91, 92, we were on the verge of making a serious shift. So they had to introduce all of these different diversions, you know, and crack ruined it. And as a social worker, you know, I saw first line the degradation that this artificial drug could bring a people to. You know, I don't even want to go there because I'll start getting all emotional. But this is a formula that's used all the time. Okay. Yeah. Okay, the Wicked Witch of the West. The poppy drugs worked on Dorothy, the lion, Toto, the flesh and blood, but had no effect on the scarecrow and the Tin Man, the artificial. Because remember, Dorothy, the lion, and Toto, they're all real. They're flesh and blood. So the drugs, back up a little, the drugs had an effect on them, but the Tin Man is artificial, and the scarecrow, so the poppy seeds had no effect on them in the movie. The two of them cried for help. Glenda, the good witch, answered their prayers with a blanket of snow, i.e. cocaine. Which nullified the narcotic effect of the poppies on them. At the last time,
At this time, apart from marijuana, heroin and cocaine in their various forms were the most available drugs in the world, or are the most.
what did it really mean?
What did it really mean?
So, there you have it. So, basically, when you understand the laws of the universe, the devil, in terms of the corporate consciousness, they always have to tell you what they're doing. And they tell us, basically, they use the movies, they use Hollywood. Hollywood was named after the wood that Merlin, the magician, used in magic. The Hollywood was able was used to create illusion. And Hollywood is still used to create illusion. But the devil is constantly always telling you what he's doing, but he's telling you it in movies. So you're thinking it's a joke, it's you know, but that's how they tell you the truth. You know, so it's based now on perception.
Just want to know what the total represents. The little dog.
Toto, it
He
is total.
exposed me on.
Toto represent like totality, total.
Total sum.
So, okay, so now that we come into the debt. This is a website with the United States Debt Clock. And the debt, when you go to the website, you see the timer going every minute, because every second the debt is increasing. Now, according to their own laws, the debt can only go but so far, you know, before they need a war. And I believe it's 8-point-something trillion. When we had 9/11, that was the beginning when the debt for the United States superseded the tolerable amount. So this is why they immediately had to create this whole artificial 9/11, because I'm sure I don't have to explain to anybody that whole thing, you know, was orchestrated. And also they had a lot of gold warehoused in the basement of the World Trade. This is why they were under such heavy military security, and it was used to transport that stuff out. You know, this is why even with the remains from the burning building, they moved it quickly from Manhattan into Staten Island and sold it overseas, because if you would test the metal pieces from the building, you would see that it had explosives and everything on there. But as it relates to the debt, it allowed them, this 9/11, you know, people say it's a 2-foot, that was 100-foot, okay? There were so many benefits that the powers that be got from that. It allowed them to create these draconian laws that eroded what was left of the Constitution, with the Patriot Act, with the, you know, all of these other, you know, orders. It allowed them to get rid of a lot of debt, because a lot of the paperwork that was warehoused, the headquarters for banking was in the World Trade Center. So a lot of those receipts, debt, and bills were also dissolved. It allowed them, right, and it allowed them to collect numerous money on the insurance policy, on the straw man and the building itself. Silverman had taken a major billion-dollar insurance policy 6 months before 9/11 occurred.
Is that why it took them 5 years to come up with the World Trade Center Commission?
Right, you know, that's, you know, they're estoppling all of the truth that's oozing out of it. Because at this point, you know, when it happened, I'm like, you know, where would the air traffic control? How does this possibly happen unless you were in agreement with it?
Kind of an aircraft buff, and I just kind of found out that the planes that hit the World Trade Center were actually military aircraft.
Right,
With GPU from an F-15.
Right, correct. And they were used with remote controls. And the buildings itself were detonated, had bombs, explosives laced throughout the whole building. Because if you dropped a penny, you know, from the top of the World Trade Center, it would have landed at the same time as the building crashed, okay, which is impossible. They tried to give you the bullshit, the pancake theory, and one layer fell on, you know, not in 8 seconds, not 8 seconds, okay?
Both of them happened at the same time.
Right, and then building the 7, which wasn't even hit, you know, that collapsed, you know, so
the buildings imploded, they didn't explode.
Correct.
Right, so that means that detonation devices were inside of the buildings
Correct.
previous or prior to the actual hit. So the buildings imploded upon themselves, not exploded.
Exactly. So, but it allowed them immediately to blame this whole thing on Ben Laden, this mystery
Yes.
man, you know, who's supposedly, you know, running through the desert with a dialysis. You know, I mean, it's just absolutely outrageous. And it's an insult that they wouldn't even take, you know, hook up with Hollywood and write a good script. You know, 'cause it's so.
It is an insult. It's an
As you
insult.
say that, I was watching a movie prior to 9/11. It was The Fugitive, one of those movies, and they showed America's Most Wanted flashing through with Wesley Snipes was in the movie, and they showed the America's Most Wanted. They quickly flashed a Bin Laden years before 9/11. So to get that subliminal that it's coming.
Right, but actually, April of 2001, the United States had already given him, I think, $26 billion to be the fall guy for 9/11. Right, and $70 billion to the Taliban in May. But also, it allowed them to go immediately into a war. War stimulates the economy. Because remember, right, the day of 9/11, the national debt had went beyond the allowable limit according to the United States Code. So immediately they needed something to create a war so that they can, you know, war in its morbid sense stimulates economy, it stimulates money, and so forth. And that's why, you know, within that week, Bush was so interested in, like, let's go after them. And then they went after, you know, Hussein, and, you know, it was just ridiculous. You know, ridiculous. Okay, now, it's important after we went through the straw man that we deal with the contracts, because all of us, our liberties are at stake, limited, you know, compromised, because we're involved in contracts that we were never fully told that they were contracts, or don't really understand the nature of a contract. So here I'm just going to go over the nature of a contract. Use my eyesight, my old age. Yeah, go ahead.
An agreement between two or more persons which
She needs
creates
the microphone. Thank you.
contract. An agreement between two or more persons which creates an obligation to do or not to do a particular thing. Its essentials are competent parties, subject matter, a legal consideration, mutuality of agreement, and mutuality of obligation. Note, Black's fifth edition.
Fifth edition. Wait, let me just stop you. So this is key. So they're saying that in order for a legal contract or a lawful contract to exist, it must have certain essential elements. Competent parties. Okay, so if you were never told of the existence of your straw man certainly is not competent to enter into a contract. Subject matter. The straw man is not the flesh and blood, so there is no subject matter. Legal consideration. The state, when they, through the birth certificate, never gave your mother an opportunity to say, well, you know, we're going to give you this birth certificate and we're going to create an artificial entity with the same name as your child, and we're going to put a bond behind it and sell it to the international creditors and use your child to make money to offset the United States debt. Because this is exactly what happened. So there was no legal consideration. Okay? A mutuality of agreement. Again, you weren't even told that your straw man existed. So it's impossible to have any mutual agreement. And mutuality of obligation. You know, the straw man, you know, is out there navigating in commerce, and you, the flesh and blood person, are working your ass off trying to pay the taxes and the debt incurred by the straw man. So note, all contracts, whether express or implied, are subject to the universal essentials of contract law pertaining to the fundamentals of the interaction between parties. These fundamentals are well codified in many places. A contract is an agreement to do or not do a certain thing. So basically, at the Shrine, our position in severing these contracts is all of these contracts that we've entered into are based completely and solely on fraud. From the birth certificate to the driver's license, to the voter's registration card, to your credit card, which I'm gonna get into the credit and show you that's a whole big lie.
Okay, so based on what I just heard, am I to interpret that the contract that you just mentioned is non and void?
Unless you make it that way. You know,
I see.
everything it's presumed and assumed. We're operating under a colorable, you know, I call them the Crayola gland. Okay, it's a colorable jurisdiction. It has the appearance of law. But because we've never, you know, questioned it or rebutted the presumption, it applies. You're under the jurisdiction. You're a straw man, you're a corporation until you deny it. So if you haven't denied it, yes, you are.
So it benefits the power that be, it don't benefit me.
It benefits the power that be to continue to be a straw man.
I see.
For someone who has a UCC1 financial statement, has their name copywritten, how can you deal with the color of law and go into these contracts, say for instance, to acquire property and things of that nature from the beginning, not from the...
You are at the end of my lecture.
Oh.
You know,
Okay,
because
continue,
that's
sister,
under
continue.
remedy. Number one, but we don't advocate copyright. I know a lot of sovereigns out there, they advocate copyrights. A lot of the European sovereigns do that. You can only, number one, copyright something you own. You don't own it because the state created it.
Yes.
Now, what we do in our paperwork is we have a security interest in the straw man. So that is to the extent, but we don't own it. Because when you copyright, okay, back to the national debt, out of the 9 trillion debt, each straw man or American person is responsible for
X
at
amount of
least,
dollars.
right, $40,000 to $50,000 of the national debt. And this is important because even if you don't have personal debt, when they begin to lock everybody up and put you in concentration camp, you still are responsible for a portion of that national debt. Unbeknownst to you, nobody told you agreed, but you haven't rebutted the presumption. So when you copyright the straw man's name, you even are more responsible and liable.
Really? Wow.
Because you're saying you own it. So if you have a dog and he bites the neighbor, you know, the neighbor could sue you because that's your dog. You own that dog. So we don't want to own the name of the straw man. We want to control it. Just like through trust, just like the creed of the rich. Own nothing, control everything.
Excuse me, say that again, control? Nothing.
Nothing.
No, own nothing, control everything. Got you. Thank you, sir.
That's specific debtors prison, they have like
Other countries, no, the debtor prisons are right here, fully manned and operating. You know, they're just waiting for another chaotic episode, you know, which should be very soon when they collapse the dollar. You know, it's already difficult to survive. So if you devalue the dollar by 50%, you have people out there wilding out, stealing, robbing, and it's going to be the rationale and justification for martial law. You see, when the World Trade was bombed back in, I think it was 93, that was designed to do what it was doing now, but it couldn't be justified because not enough people were killed. You know, so with this one in 2001, they can justify, you know, the Homeland Security, the Patriot Act, because what, 3,000 people were killed. You know, so it's all about the Benjamins. You know, okay. It is essential to the existence of a contract that there should be parties capable of contracting. This is another way we can also get out of these contracts, because remember, the main contract was your birth certificate, and you didn't even do that. Your mother did it, your father did it. So, you know, these are just elements of how we dissolve or neutralize these contracts. There must be consent. Did you consent to a birth certificate? No. Lawful object and a sufficient cause and consideration. So, who may contract? All persons are capable of contracting except minors, persons of unsound mind, and persons deprived of civil rights. So basically, a lot of these contracts were done without our consent or permission. You know, so when we study, I just want to make something clear, because a lot of, or some Moorish brothers and sisters are under the assumption that I'm saying by using commercial law and UCC that makes you sovereign. I want to say publicly on tape, I'm not saying no such thing. Your birthright makes you sovereign. Your genetic ancestry is what makes you sovereign. And unfortunately, being sovereign or not, we have entered into contracts which compromise our sovereignty. You know, Moors have traffic infraction issues than anybody I know. Why? You know, you're a sovereign Moor, but why are you having all of these problems with motor vehicles? Well, that's because you have contracts, you know, so that's separate and apart from your status that you're claiming and proclaiming. So it's about using both sides, standing on your square, reclaiming your nationality, and understanding commercial law and how to properly and effectively navigate in commerce. Because this is a whole body of knowledge that we've never been taught, and as a result of that, we are suffering greatly. This is why our businesses don't last. They, you know, we have problems even engaging in commerce with each other, because there's certain laws of commerce that we don't know and we were never taught. And then combined with that, desperation, Negroidian behavior, you know, you have okay.
Make a point.
Yeah. Yeah, that Negroidian shit. And you know, you all know it when it's the nigga shit with business. And
No trust.
It's predicated on ignorance. And I'm going to go on record and saying it. It's predicated on ignorance. Okay, the consent of parties to contract must be free, mutual, and communicated by each other. Again, none of these contracts, from motor vehicles to birth certificate, contain any of these elements. So this is how we're basically doing our paperwork differently. We're rejecting the liability that comes with these contracts because they were brought to us in a fraudulent manner from the door. Okay, and apparent consent is not real or free when obtained through duress, menace, fraud, undue influence, or mistake. You know, if you want to register your child in school, you know, they will harass the hell out of you if you don't bring a birth certificate, this, or your matrix instruments. You know, and, okay, when a contract wholly void, okay, where a contract has but a single object, and such object is unlawful, whether in whole or in part, or wholly impossible of performance, or so vaguely expressed as to be wholly unascertainable, the entire contract is void. So this is where we're coming from again. We are saying we're rebuking. You know how your grandmother, I rebuke you. We are rebuking these fraudulent contracts. Effective its legality. If any part of a single consideration for one or more object of several considerations for a single object is unlawful, the entire contract is void. Okay. I know, Doc, it's 9:20, right? We gotta be out of here by a few minutes. And there's so much stuff that I wanna cover.
It's 9 o'clock, so
9 o'clock?
yeah.
I had 9:20.
No, it's 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock.
That's your work now.
About a half. About a half. You can go. About a half.
We need a part 2.
How many more, because I want to get into the whole criminal injustice.
Yeah.
So you, okay, well, okay, this is basically, even the Bible deals with the aspects of a contract, offer, acceptance, consideration, and mutual assent, which is mutual agreement. And so none of the contracts that we're involved in has any of this stuff.
Sister Myra, can I just ask you, can you say something about now they want to put those chips in your license?
Right,
And
the
they're gonna
RFID
make you,
chips.
if you don't get this chip, you can't get a license without.
Right, this is why I'm coming to the community with remedy, because this is part of the national ID, which will be in effect in May 2007. And those on my email list, I think I sent out an email showing you and different things you can do to test to see which of your credit cards already have this. And there's also a picture of how it'll be placed and where it'll be placed in your hand. You know, so it's, you know, it's about rebutting the presumptions. You are a straw man until you deny it.
The microchip that the sister mentioned, does that represent the what's been stated in the Bible about the mark of the beast or 666? Okay.
All right, whole question so we can move forward. Yeah.
Okay, yes, yes, please. Okay, criminal justice, so let me just get to the credit cards, because I'm sure many of us got debt issue. Okay, we are under a bankruptcy. The bankruptcy is tightened up even much more as of last October, October 17th. The United States went from a Chapter 11 bankruptcy, which is reorganization, to a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, which is liquidation. Now, as I said, I pointed out the straw man, the Roosevelt took the birth certificate. There's a bond against everybody's birth certificate valued at $1 million. They borrowed this money from foreign creditors, and then they passed that debt back to the people. In this, what did you say? I lost my, no, I didn't.
Credit
what?
You want credit and debtor.
Right, credit cards. Right, now, under this bankrupt system, we're using fiat money. And as you remember, before the symbol for a dollar meant this. Now, basically, this is the symbol for a dollar. No smoking, no cigarettes. You see the line going through it? No money. Okay? So everything we're using is artificial form of currency inside of a bankruptcy already. Okay? And so what happens is, now that we are in a Chapter 7, which is liquidation, the foreign creditors that own the birth certificate of the American people can now go into liquidation. And basically, you know, This is how it relates to the work camp. Somebody had talked about the work camp. In a liquidation, basically, all your assets are assessed and taken to pay off the bankruptcy. In this point, the American people, their assets represent their energy. Okay, and in the energy, the concentration camps basically are set up. There's several in every state. They're all manned and fully operational. They even have, you'll see a lot of the storage facilities. They're all near railroads and train stations, if you think back on Fulton, downtown Brooklyn, Long Island City, the big storage facility, and all of these trains. And they're basically designed to start to begin to transport people into these concentration camps. Basically, I sent out an email showing you one operation on land. You go through a turnstile, it's like Roach Motel, you go in but you don't come out. All the barriers are pointing inward, so whoever is inside, you can't get out. And basically, the American people are being set up to work off the national debt in these concentration camps. If we could keep the questions to a minimum.
What about Georgia stones and how many people they want dead by? Now, obviously, it got to be dedicated.
Well, it's again all about the Benjamin. Even with the whole war from what developed with 9/11, all of these people in the military, they understand that they have to disarm a certain amount of the military, because when martial law and all of this is publicly declared, they know the military is not going to be coming to grab their uncle to and put him in a concentration camp. So this is why you see so much foreign military here in the United States now. Because they had to also eliminate a certain amount of the military before this went into place through, the vaccines, the Iraq, all of that. Not to mention that they got $10 million on their straw man. So all these soldiers that are dying, again, it's stimulating the economy. So, with liquidations, right, and the credit card. So because we are using no money, we're using fiat money, this is also one of the reasons why there's so much hatred with Iran and Iraq, because based on their religious beliefs, they don't believe in using fiat money. They're discharging their debt with gold and silver. So the powers that be, the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, they can't afford to have a sovereign power or country using real money when so much everybody is using fiat.
Yes.
So this is one of the main reasons that they're coming under attack so much. And also it would point out and show up the bankruptcy, and people would begin to ask questions. So with this whole controlled system of fiat money, it affects everything in everyday commerce, because there's no money, everything is contract. So when you go and you get a credit card or you get a mortgage, everyone in this room, I'm sure, thinks that when you apply for your little credit card or your little mortgage, that the bank is lending you their personal assets, and that because they're lending you their assets, they are now allowed to charge you interest or finance charges. Based on all banks' charters, they cannot lend their own assets. What's creating the money, and this is why you have to understand who you are in commerce. Your signature is creating the money. When you sign a promissory note, you're signing a promise to pay. And really, that's all Federal Reserve notes is. It's a promise to pay because it has no value. So you're signing this promissory note. Now, you're giving it to the banker. They are now depositing it in what's known as a demand deposit account, which is really a fancy word for a checking account. You know, and when they take your signature on the promissory note, they deposit it in the demand deposit account. It comes out on the books on the other side as credit. So that's what they're lending you, the money that your signature created, not their asset. Okay, I know that's a kind of a difficult concept to get. It took me a while. I was like, so you're saying, but this is basically what's going on, and they're charging you interest over 10, 20, 30 years to get rid of it, and you are really, you create the money, your signature. In a bankruptcy, the greatest thing is your signature. That's why it's important that you modify your signature in this New World Order climate. There's several remedies that we use. You decided without recourse, UCC 1207, UCC 103 and 308. What's the one we was talking about outside, brother? 308, right. And so that, you know, you are reserving all your rights. So that whenever you do wake up and figure all this stuff out, you can come out of these contracts and literally revoke your signature. Because there is no money. The people are the money. The people's labor, their energy, and their ignorance. That's what represents the money. And I know that's, again, that was a concept that I had to go through that to fully understand what it means. And, you know, I had my oh shit moment. But, you know, because it's so diabolical. You know, we can't even really phantom, you know, you're charging a 30-year interest, you know, for money that I created, that wasn't even the assets from your bank, you know.
I think it was Brother Clay that said, if you think about it, everything in this room was created by man, woman, right?
Yes.
So we are really the money itself. You know, the chair didn't create us, we created the chair. So it goes back to us.
So the Truman Show. You know the Truman Show?
Right, exactly. You know, so we have been so used to being in an artificial jurisdiction that, you know, it's the natural order of the day. Because, you know, some people are like, well, why do I need to know all this? And, you know, it's your personal choice, you know. You know, it's a lot of stuff to learn, it's a lot of stuff to absorb, but you need to understand what's happening so when things start cracking, when the martial law is publicly, because we've been under martial law for a while, it just isn't publicly declared. Now, when it's publicly declared, trust me, shit's gonna hit the fan. Okay, so we have to understand when the real creditors stand up, and that's us. So that means that you stand up and you protect yourself in commerce, and you understand who you are, where you are. You know, the whole nature of a loan. This is how I was able to win 2 civil cases in court without an attorney. Because what we need to understand with the credit card cases, this whole dynamic I just told you about, that your signature created the money, not that the credit card bank lent you their assets. Say you default on a credit card, the credit card company, they have an insurance policy, they do what's called a charge-off, then they sell it to a debt collector for 10 cents on the dollar, and these are the people that are calling you and say, you know, okay, you owe $15,000, if you work with me, you know, I'll accept 10. Now, they just brought this so-called $15,000 debt for maybe $1,000, and they're gonna get you to pay them 10. You know, and this is where standing comes into place. You had a contract with the credit card company. not with this third person. So the person who bought the debt, when they're coming after you, they have no legal standing, they have no jurisdiction, because you don't have a contract. You have to understand that every single thing you do is contract. Everything, whether they tell you or not, everything is contract. And if you're not skillful enough in signing these contracts, then you become liable for it. So now you have this third-party debt collector hounding you, stalking you, calling your job, calling you at home. You turn over, try to get some sleep, they're harassing the hell out of you over a debt that they don't even have a right to collect in the first place. So basically, when I took, they took me to court, I basically asked them to verify and validate the debt. And this is a copy of the certificate of disposition showing that I got everything dismissed. And so now you can even clean up your credit with this, because you send this to the credit reporting agency to get both negative statements off your credit card. And there's a series of letters that we send the credit card collectors to validate, prove how you have any legal standing in this case. Prove how you lent me any money. Prove how the original creditor lent me money for that sake. So once we understand that this whole thing is a scam and a fraud, and we begin to learn the language to protect ourselves in commerce, and to, not go under assumption and presumption, we can change the whole game. Okay.
Can we get a copy of that?
A copy?
Is it on this that lady had?
No, that's basically my personal, it's called a certificate of disposition. And it has the court seal on it. Yeah, the court seal on it, and it just shows that I won that case. And that they basically can't come back and try to collect that.
Do you have to send that in before you go to court, or you take it with
No,
you?
you get this from the court after you win your case.
Oh.
It's proof that I won my case.
Okay.
So I'm sitting up here, I try to show proof, because a lot of this stuff just sounds so psychotic, no, she didn't go over this course. Yeah, I did. And here's the evidence.
How long a process was it? How long did it take?
Months and sleepless night and anxiety. My good buddy Don and a couple of my friends were there with me. They gave me a private courtroom. They didn't want anybody. So that's why people have a hard time believing this, because you don't know anybody who's done this. Because people who are operating as sovereigns and winning these cases, they're in private courtrooms and it's sealed. So, when I come, that's why I'm bringing the evidence. So, it's like, yeah, right, But, so they don't want this publicized.
No, they
We were the only ones in the courtroom. And basically went in there as a sovereign more, standing on my square, to the point where the judge walked in the room, I had my back turned, much less stand up. I'm the sovereign. Okay? And so the law clerk was trying to get me to stand up. He's like, you gotta stand up, you gotta stand up. And I just completely ignored them, and the judge was like, no, let it go, let it go. But then also, I'm not gonna make it seem that easy. The level of paperwork that I came in there with, there's something known as apostilles, authentications, letters, documents that you get from the Secretary of State, which makes your document a completely legal, lawful document that they can't ignore. We put this on all of our status documents. We file them in the public record. This is the United States of America seal. This one's from Colin Powell. I wear these people out, make them do their job. As you can see, the seal. And when I wanted to talk briefly about the situation with my son. March 24th of this year, he was standing at a bus stop minding his own business. Apparently there was a robbery going on across the street. The lazy cops just found the first 4 melanated people that they could find, arrested them. went through this whole long process. He was in lockup for like 15 hours. You know, basically, it was just hell. And so the attorney that they assigned him, I explained to him, under no circumstances do we want a plea bargain. You know, you just get him out on his own recognizance and I'll take it from there. Anyhow you do anything less than that, I guarantee you by Monday morning you'll be in a soup kitchen. And I proceeded to read him his bar number. Most people don't, most lawyers don't even know their bar number. So once I read that to him, he's like, okay. You know, so you have to basically speak, if you cannot, it's about, in this commerce game, it's about knowing how to harm people commercially if they trespass on your rights. If you can't do that, and this is why there's a lot of different groups out there doing paperwork, and people are getting into trouble, people are not benefiting from it, because if it's not done properly, yes, you could get in serious trouble and go to jail behind trying to be sovereign, you know, being a fictitious sovereign, okay? So, you really have to know how to submit your paperwork properly. You know how to have to use certain seals on them. It has to contain certain language. Otherwise, you know, it just doesn't work. You know, you have to do it correct. There's no room for error and there's no room for doing it incorrect. And there's a lot of people out there selling paperwork that's just like our money, useless security. You know, and so you need to be able to study. This is why the 13-week class, you know, a lot of people's like, oh, $3,500, that's so much, this and that. What you get from that $3,500 is beyond. You know, it's when we went to the city that day and we met with these investment bankers, talking to them about negotiable instruments and things, and we showed him our paperwork. And he kept saying over and over, what law firm did your paperwork? What law firm did your paperwork? I'm like, you know, we did our paperwork. I did my paperwork. He's like, yes, but what law firm did, you know? And so he said the only paperwork that he's seen this type was by someone who did obtain a lawyer to try to access their exemption. And he paid $25 million for the paperwork. So there's a lot of bullshit paperwork going out there. And if you want cheap, there's a list of people out there that I can give you who can do your paperwork. But don't come back to me after I give you the number. You know, so you have to be precise. There's no room for error, and once you put certain seals on it, you know, it puts your documents at an international status. You know, this again with my son, it was a complete nightmare. Even though the victim said that my son and the other boys had absolutely nothing to do with his robbery, the district attorney, the Queens District Attorney's Office, still had all intentions of moving forward. So at that point, that completely pissed me off. I'm like, you don't even have a victim, and you're going to still railroad these 4 boys. But the most important thing you gotta understand is this whole prison system is about commerce. When you first get arrested and they take your fingerprints and your picture, that is the beginning of the commercial game. That is the beginning of the bond. If you notice, all these police officers now, they're not using badge numbers. They have the 5-digit badge numbers. If you look on the ticket, you pull up the ticket with the tax ID number on the bottom. I scanned it. It should be. You know, so police officers are nothing more than revenue agents. This is why they're doing everything to arrest you, from jaywalking to this to that. Because you have to understand, every time, so when you're in prison, they're tapping into your exemption, which I didn't go into today, but basically, we all have that as a result of HJR 192 when they took the lawful form of money out. But it's very difficult to get to. But certain corporations are using our exemption every single day. And you have to understand, for every person that's in lockup, they're getting $350 a day from their Social Security. You know, and if you're on probation, well, minus $40 for other people. But if you're on probation or parole, they're getting the whole $350 because they don't have to pay for the update. So this is why, you know, the cops are out there just trying to arrest everybody. You know, even the cops are themselves are protesting that they shouldn't have a quota on the amount of arrests, but it makes money. You know, all of this stuff ends up being traded on Wall Street, these mutual fund, stock market, everything. I had a whole thing I wanted to go in. I'm just trying to go through everything. But there's an entire industry that is being created off of our back. You want to say something? If you want to.
Well, just basically, when you have a criminal situation, and one of the first things that they tell you is that you have charges against you. But what are really charges?
And we go along with the program, we acquiesce. But in this case that went all the way to New York State Supreme Court, it states that the police department does not have the right to take your prints or take your picture under any circumstances until there's been charges have been proved and substantiated against you. Huh?
Can you say that case again, please?
Gal versus Bingham. Now, what happens when you're arrested, G-O-W-B-I-N-G-H-A-M? As I would recommend, that you wouldn't sit there and get belligerent, you know, I'm a sovereign, this, that, because we've seen from experience that doesn't work. You know, you have to really be extra humble and clear and stand on your square. You say, you know, excuse me, officers, no disrespect. You know, I understand my rights, and unless you can show me proof that this case, because I suggest you keep it in your wallet, has been overturned, I refuse to give my fingerprints or my taking any pictures. Now, when they don't have that, they can only legally hold you for 3 days, and then that's the end of the case. You know, otherwise, you know, with my son's situation, we went to a whole series of 3 months with just going back and forth, submitting our sovereign paperwork, documenting our status, threatening to lien everybody in the room and take their bond, you know, because I'm telling you, this is the only thing that they understand. So one of the tools that we use as free entities, it's known as the administrative procedure. And this is covered under Title 5 in the U.S. Code. And basically, we need to understand that the 3 highest powers in the state is the Secretary of State, which is where we're getting our seals from, the sheriff, you know, except in New York City, and the notary. The notary is a sovereign person's judge. A notary is capable of doing an administrative procedure, which in essence is a legal, lawful, judicial proceeding without the courtroom. You know, and it's just basically, they have like short 3-step processes. The one we use is 9 steps, and it's completely thorough. So like these credit card agencies, we're writing them, we're asking them to verify the debt. They don't answer, we go through the 9-step administrative procedure. We send them a true bill for basically engaging in fraud, trying to extort money out of us when they don't have legal standing, and we're sending them a $3 million bill. Then we go through the administrative procedure, we file it in district court, and then we now have we put a UCC-1 lien on the judgment, because a notary can issue a judgment once you've gone through all the steps. Now, most notaries, unfortunately, they don't understand that they have this power. The only notaries that are still doing this commonly is in the bank. When they take your foreclosure on your property, they're using an administrative procedure and using a notary. You can look in the notary handbook, and it'll also give you more information. We need as many notaries in the community as possible, because as this reign on terror emerges against us, we need to use a notary to document and create a paper trail, and to also even be compensated. Because now this same lien, just as a debt collector, once you perfected your lien, have it filed in the federal court, you now, and file it with the UCC lien, you now have a perfected lien that you can sell on the open market for 10 cents on the dollar, just like the regular debt collectors are doing. But in this case, yours is more lawful because you have standing, because you've tried to communicate with them through this administrative procedure, validate the debt, prove you lent me money, this and that, and it's a whole process. I'm making it seem simple, but you're using registered mail, sending out letters. It's a whole process.
I got a question. I was reading where the sovereign people were the bankers, the postmaster, and they own notice. All they used was their thumbprint to be the notice.
Exactly. And that was then before all of these fictitious corporations, came into
So it
being.
no longer applies?
Well, we use our thumbprint on certain documents, yes, but we also have a seal, a sovereign seal saying a sui juris more, and that we seal all our documents. Because a person who signs last on your document, they own the paper, and this is why they make the notary sign last. So if this is our document on the backhand corner, we'll put our signature, so it is the last signature on the page, and so we have complete jurisdiction of that. Okay? Well, in closing, I just want to say thank you to everybody in my crew that put up with my craziness, helped me. Marlon did the PowerPoint, Camille, Rendell, Shawnee, my children, my buddy Don, everybody who made this possible, thank you. The actual 13-week class will be available at the end of the month. We have found new information, we're constantly updating. There's so much information that we have, maybe we'll do a part 2, because the absolute
You gotta come on time.
crucial things, that's true, but, shit happens.
Give us back here! We can all see how valuable the sister is. All right, so we want to appreciate, give our special thanks. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. So I'm pushing for the sister to come back. Hey, well, listen, get on that email list and make sure you sign the email list on the way out if you didn't, because your participation will determine when we bring the sister back. Everybody got an email her every day and tell her to come back. That's what I'm